Well, good morning. Just moved my leg because it's burning. And welcome to another week on my allotment. And at the risk of giving another boring weather forecast, what a week. What a week. The rain has not stopped. I could not have put that chippings path in at a better time. So timing was good for that. I'm really pleased I've done it. I don't particularly like the look of it, but you know, sometimes you just have to be practical. And then there's my shelter that I've put between the two sheds. And when I finish talking, I'll show you the clips of me putting that up earlier in the week with invaluable help from Barry. So thank you very much to Barry for coming over, giving up his time on his plot and helping me, because you know, doing something as big as that, you need two pairs of hands. He also trained as a carpenter, and whilst that's not anything he'd be proud of, you know, his advice was invaluable. So thank you, Barry. And I'm really pleased I've done that. I'm sat here now. It's bitterly cold out there. It is properly cold now. I had to defrost the windscreen on the van this morning to get here. Everywhere's covered in ice and there's standing water everywhere, and I'll take you later for a little wander down the plot and show you how everything's looking. But as we stand right now, I think I've said it before, I'm pretty much ready for winter. Most of the beds that I can, that are empty, I've got a good mulch layer down of my own compost. Those that I'm not doing that with, because actually we've run out of manure. The farmer hasn't brought us any new manure, and the old pile that we had is now gone. Everybody's used it all, which I've not seen happen before. So there's no more I can, otherwise all that cardboard that I've put down on the extra bit of land, I would put manure on that, but I can't. So I've done as much as I can. And as we stand, I've got some brassicas left in the ground. I've got leeks, cabbage, kale, some parsnips, all the sort of old conventional traditional crops, and I have planted some garlic and some red and white onions, and back in the greenhouse at home I have some Aqua Dolce Claudia broad beans, and they're about, I don't know, they're well over a foot tall already. I don't know if I planted them a bit too early. Cool, that's burning my leg. In fact, I'll put a bit more in while I'm waffling. So yeah, I'm fairly happy that I'm where I need to be, and short of buying a little bit more plastic to cover the one or two beds that still aren't covered, I think, you know. And of course the conditions everywhere is so wet. The moment I step off those chipping paths, the paths I've got that are still grass, you just can't tread on them, otherwise you ruin them. So be it. So I'm very happy with where I'm at. And you know, the winter really, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Pick more crops. If we get more manure, I will carry some down if the ground dries up and manure those other plots. But other than that, yeah, I'm going to be hard pushed to find anything to do up here constructively other than enjoy being up here in the shed, which is no bad thing. So let's go and have a look at what I've been doing this week.
I didn't realise you were going to do it quite so quickly.
No! Oh, no, right, so it's got to go over, I think. It's the same again, the cut's not perfectly square.
Yeah. I got this end, go the other.
Yeah. just harvested a few leeks for Cheryl to make some soup tonight, and I have a suspicion that they are starting to rot in the ground. This feels just a little bit soft, and there's a sort of a tinge of brown to it, and you're pulling them out and everything's all soft and mushy. So you know, I've got a fantastic yield of leeks over there. There's 11, right, so there's about nearly 80 leeks, and I've probably had 10, so about 70 leeks left in the ground, and they're all a good size, but I think I might lose them. Yeah, that's soft as well. I'll see what happens when I peel them tonight and prepare them for Cheryl, but I think we might lose some of this crop, which will be awful, because they looked fantastic a month ago when it was nice and dry in September. But you've got to take what the weather throws at you, and it's throwing lots and lots of rain at us. All the beds are full of standing water right now, which is why it's okay to be working on this this roof. And this one was as thick as those, but I peeled it down until it wasn't soft, and that's all that's left. So it's not promising. But look, can you see the end there, all mushy? What a shame. I think I might have to console myself with a cup of tea. Well, there's a winter harvest, distinctly different from the summer and autumn, but highly nutritious and tasty nevertheless. Well, it's Thursday afternoon. I've finished work for the week, and I've been busy after work a couple of days. This is the fruit bed with gooseberries and black currants and a honeyberry, and this has had cardboard put down. I'm forever having to weed this bed, and to be honest, I'm fed up keep weeding it, and because I don't do anything with the soil, the weeds just keep coming back. So I've completely cardboarded it. If I go there, see, you see that? That's good thick cardboard, all the sellotape and plastic removed. Just put the cardboard down over the top of the weeds, and then a good 3 or 4 inches thick of very, very well rotted cow manure. It's been there, I guess, about 18 months, and I don't know how long it was, how old it was before it got to the allotment site, but I'm hoping that that's going to really save me a lot of time and effort keep weeding this fruit bed. We shall see what happens with time. I'll let you know. What else have I been up to? Well, courtesy of Bridget, we have an arrangement with the farm shop. They put all their coffee grounds in a big dustbin, and between a few of us we go down and collect them, and my turn was today as appointed by Bridget. So I've just been down and collected some beautiful coffee grounds, and this morning I was working at the garden centre and I brought another load of cardboard. I've had this urge to collect cardboard, so I've got all that cardboard there, and with that cardboard I'm going to cover the rest of this bed here. I've got a piece of cardboard that fitted in the middle there between all the leeks around the edge, and I'm going to do a bit more on this end here, and then where all these nasturtiums have grown up I'm going to put some more cardboard down, and hopefully, you know, that'll put the nasturtiums to bed and suppress the weeds that are coming up, and we shall see. So, bit to do now. I weeded this bed. I haven't put any cardboard on it, but I have mulched it very thickly with my own compost, and I've done that bed there as well. and any bed that has black plastic on it has also been mulched. So very pleased with the progress, and it's still October and I'm almost ready for spring now. My two sons have been in touch on Facebook recently, and apparently my eldest son David has shared my videos, or one of my videos or something, with some of his friends on Facebook, which I didn't know you could do. And as he shared it, he suggested they might like to use it as a drinking game, and every time I have a cup of tea they have to take a drink. Well, that'd be a pretty slow affair, I think. However, I've got good news for you, David. When Charlotte moved her stuff out of her flat because she's renting it out, she got rid of stuff she didn't want. And one of them was a large box of PG Tips tea bags. So if there's one major change on the allotment this week, it's that I'm going to up my rate of drinking tea. Good luck with that hangover. Well, let's have a little wander around the plot, starting at the bottom end. My shed looks very homely up there, spouting out a load of smoke. I hadn't noticed that before now. It's blimmin' warm in there. I've had real trouble getting back out here. Anyway, all this cardboard I put down has stayed put, which I'm pleased about. And I really do hope that suppresses the weeds before it disappears. Taken down, I assume, by the worms into the soil. And I think you can probably hear my footsteps. I've rarely seen rain like we've had this weekend, and this morning, after all the rain and the wind, my windscreen on the van was frozen. So the weather's making us have it. Anyway, I'm really pleased I did this chippings thing, because once you step onto the chippings, that sloppy noise stops. And I've got most of the beds covered now. I do still need a bit of plastic, but you can see the problem here. Although it's covered in plastic, it's under standing water, so I guess underneath that is sodden. We shall see. I took down the runner bean poles the other day, and there's some mess left there that I've got to clear up. And you can see over there where the rain is so heavy, it actually washes the chippings away. Look at that. They've been taken out by the tide. And there's standing water everywhere. Really, it is unworkable. I've come up here today, but I'm not sure what I can achieve in this weather. However, I think the celeriac looks good to go. Never used celeriac before. Something else that Cheryl's going to have to work with. But the garlic that I've put in the bed is all up now, I think. And I've kept some back in pots in the greenhouse, and I'm going to, so it's a 50-50 split, and I'll see what happens and how that works. But I'm guessing the leeks are still sodden. Some of them look pretty awful now. That's a shame. But not a lot I can do about it. And the onions. The day before, Monty Don said, don't put your onions in the ground if it's too wet. Keep them in the greenhouse in their seed trays. I'd already put them in the ground. So I'm just going to live with it. Can't help it now. The raspberries should be cropping now, but again, they just turn to red mush on the canes, and they're not really pickable. And there's the fruit bed that I showed you the other day, that I put cardboard down and then a load of very well rotted manure. And then there's as he steps off into, sorry, I pressed the off button by mistake. All my brassicas. The Brussels sprouts are all leaning a bit, but otherwise they look okay. The Killerton cabbages look pickable. I did like Muddy Boots' thing the other day where he hung his upside down in a shed. I might try that with a couple of them and see how I fare. I find this quite interesting. I left this here. This is the one butternut squash that I couldn't pick because it's grown through the wire, chicken wire, and swelled on the other side, so it's stuck. There you go. So moving on up, the butternuts are still in the cold frames waiting to be used. There's only so much butternut squash soup you can eat. Gorgeous colours on the blueberries. And look how, I've just noticed how the flashing on the shed dries out because it warms up the roof. As long as it doesn't burst into flames, I don't mind. Spring onions and some carrots. Don't suppose we'll use those now. And I turned up this morning and there's a single solitary golf ball sat on my plot, which I guess came over the fence over the last couple of days. And then there's my shelter that was very timely put up. And back up to the shed. And I'm going to go in. I'm just going to have another cup of tea and enjoy being up here. I'm not keen to get stuck into anything right now. I've put all this effort into a shed, I'm going to blimmin' well enjoy it. I can feel the heat now coming out through this door. I've watched a bit of telly recently, which is not like me. I don't particularly enjoy watching the television anymore, not the terrestrial channels, and all the rugby. And well done to England. Me and my son Daniel sat very, very stressed yesterday morning and watched England beat the All Blacks. So well done to England. What a fantastic game, one of the best I've ever watched. But I have to say, I don't enjoy it. I live every tackle. I was worn out afterwards. And in another couple of hours, Wales take on the Springboks. So good luck to Wales. I'd love to see them get through and meet us in the final. It'd be a wonderful final. But either way, I've got it on record and I'll watch it when I get back. But watching ITV, which has, for those who don't live in Great Britain, it's a commercial channel that has adverts in it. There's been a lot on the adverts from the British Heart Foundation. And I found that fascinating. They were asking for money to carry on their life-saving research into what causes heart disease. And I thought, we already know what causes heart disease. I mean, there's thousands, literally thousands of studies into heart disease and what causes it. And I made an analogy a few videos ago about if you want to know how to run a railway system, go to the Germans. And if you want to know how to avoid heart disease, go to the countries where there is no heart disease. And although not many of them exist anymore because they've adopted our Western food and lifestyle and therefore they've adopted our diseases, but places like Uganda, rural China, these places have never heard of heart disease. Now, why is that? And the studies have been done, and the reason for that is they don't live a sedentary life. They work outdoors and they farm their own land. If they go to work, they walk to work, and so on and so forth. They eat rice, vegetables. They have no dairy industry. They have no cattle and livestock industry. So they don't eat saturated fat. So I was perplexed by that. And of course, the money you give to the British Heart Foundation, they hand over to the pharmaceutical companies, and that's where the money goes, because the pharmaceutical industries aren't looking to cure heart disease. We can cure heart disease tomorrow if we want to, because we know what causes it and how to cure it. But they're not looking to cure it, they're looking to make the next pill. And so I went to their website and I thought, let's have a look at what the British Heart Foundation thinks causes heart disease. And it was really fascinating. They had a suggested menu, and it said, there's lots and lots of recipes and so on, but the suggested menu, because they do mention that a balanced diet helps prevent heart disease, but of course nobody knows what a balanced diet is, and they use that. That's a safe way of not saying anything that might harm the agricultural industry, because of course if you want to cure heart disease, you've got to stop eating saturated fat. So their suggested menu for breakfast was eggs and tomato something or other with a fancy name. Well, eggs are almost all cholesterol. That's a really good start if you want to keep your heart disease going. Eat eggs. For lunch it was a beef something or other, I can't remember. Beef, red meat, a class 1 carcinogen and full of saturated fat. This is the British Heart Foundation. Then for an evening meal, and I can remember this one, it was a chicken and root vegetable bake. Chicken, the meat most closely associated with obesity. It's fascinating. And nowhere on their website did they say to decrease the amount of meat you eat. And of course the other thing is, with all this disease we have nowadays, mental illness, mental illness is an epidemic now. I'd never heard of it when I was a child. Alzheimer's is rife and is awful. I have family member who died with Alzheimer's, and it was absolutely terrible. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Dementia is set to triple by 2050. So mental illness, dementia, and all these things going on. And of course it's all down to saturated fat. We are not meat eaters. We are designed, and if you want to know why we're not meat eaters, rather than me talk to you, go on to YouTube and type in Dr. Milton, M-I-L-T-O-N, Dr. Milton Mills, M-I-L-L-S. Absolutely fascinating scientist who gives lectures on why we shouldn't eat meat and the difference between an omnivore, herbivore, and the meat eaters, and why we are, our bodies physiologically are not designed to eat meat. So because we eat so much of it now, and it's not caught out in the wild, it's farmed, all this saturated fat pervades around the body, and we can't get rid of it. The stomach acid can't deal with it, and it keeps going around the body. And saturated fat, the excess amount of it, is what causes diabetes, despite modern medicine saying it's all about blood sugar. It's nothing to do with blood sugar. High blood sugar is a result of all the saturated fat in the cells stopping the insulin and the glucose getting in. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that another time. But you've got saturated fat in the body, so it works its way around. It blocks the arteries, the coronary arteries going into the heart, and you end up with a heart attack. It gets into the brain and it causes a stroke. It goes down into the private parts and it causes erectile dysfunction. It goes around the back of the eyes and it causes cataracts and eye strokes, and people get blind. And of course 20% of your blood supply goes to the brain. It's a very blood intensive organ, and the gloopy saturated fat clogs up the connections in the brain and causes dementia. And the science on this is old. They've done so many studies. There's one done in Chicago about meat eaters and non-meat eaters and dementia. And even if you have the genes that mean you're more predisposed to dementia, and they do exist, even then, if you don't eat meat, you completely negate the risk of dementia. But you go to all these websites for, Alzheimer's and the Heart Foundation and all these people, there's no mention of stopping eating meat. you can't do that. You know, the animal agricultural industry is giving these charities money to stop them doing that. So yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, and of course people just simply don't know. They simply don't know, and they carry on doing these things. They've done autopsies or post-mortems on children that are killed in road traffic accidents and things like that. And children in the Western world, you know, UK, America, Australia, Germany, and so on, and you know, the Scandinavian countries, 10-year-old boys and girls all have heart disease. You know, they have atherosclerosis build-up already in their arteries. Indeed, we are so bad as a culture nowadays that children born to obese mothers have arterial lesions already at birth. You know, they're set up for a life of heart disease at birth. It's a pretty gloomy picture. Although there's a cure, there is an answer, but it's just not talked about. And then one last thing I'll say on my thought for the day, health-wise, is the other thing about meat that nobody mentions is nowadays all livestock in modern farms, unless it's organic, and even then I have my suspicions, but definitely, you know, normal farm-raised animals are fed antibiotics as a preventative, because they live in such awful conditions, in such confines, they're fed antibiotics. 80% of the antibiotics used in the United Kingdom, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, are fed to animals as a preventative health measure. So when you eat your chicken or your beef, they are full of the residue of antibiotics. And antibiotics, the name comes from the Latin antibios. Antibios means anti-life. So whilst antibiotics may save your life in a certain circumstance, routinely absorbing antibiotics, they kill all the good bacteria in your microbiome, in your stomach. And we now know that your microbiome is directly linked to brain health. So if your child is eating chicken and pork and beef and all those other, and you know, farm salmon are fed 3 times their body weight in their life of antibiotics. So if you want a really bad biome in your stomach, which is directly linked to mental health, feed your child farm salmon. So, you know, you kill all the good bacteria in your stomach, which is 80 to 90% of your immune system. So now you have a completely compromised immune system, and your brain is suffering because your microbiome is unhealthy and has no good bacteria. It's all linked. It's all linked. And you know, neuroscientists are looking at the brain, cardiovascular people are looking at the heart, gastroenterologists are looking at the stomach. All these people are looking at different parts of the body in isolation, and it all comes down generally to one thing: the food you eat. So yeah, I was fascinated by the British Heart Foundation's advert. Information is power. Fascinates me. And I'm really pleased to see a few comments from viewers saying that they're enjoying the book, How Not to Die. I'm really pleased that people have taken my recommendation and are reading it, and I hope it changes your lives and the lives of your families, more importantly children, for the better. So I hope I haven't offended anybody with this little thought for the day. I don't do it to upset people. I do it to provoke thought and to provoke critical thinking and to give a balanced view of the information out there. And the reason I do it on this is because it's linked. You know, it's linked to all this wonderful pesticide-free, antibiotic-free food I grow and eat here. My door's swinging shut and has just walloped the tripod. Yeah, anyway, that's enough of that. I hope you find that interesting, and if you don't, you've already switched off by now anyway. It's a pretty pathetic effort really compared to Terry and Joe's, but there you go. Well, I have got a lovely crop of Brussels sprouts, and I've just spent a bit of time picking off all the lower leaves. In fact, I can see some there I've missed. Isn't that always the way? And restaking the ones that have been blown over, because apparently if they're not well staked and immobile, it can cause the little sprouts to blow. So yeah, they're looking a lot neater. Gonna have to go back and pick up those ones I've left. And that's a wheelbarrow of leaves to go on the compost. I'm very lucky that one of my customers lives in a very small estate about mostly elderly ladies, and lots of them buy these gardening magazines, and I go to her every fortnight, and every time I go there she gives me a great big lump of gardening magazines, which is very nice of her and the others. And I keep them in the shed here and I read them occasionally when I'm having a tea break. And I just wondered what your opinion is of some of the contrary advice you get. It really leaves me confused. In the same magazine, this just happens to be Grow Your Own, but it's not alone in this. On one article, you'll have a chap saying, you know, like Charles Dowding, don't dig the soil, you know, don't till the soil, don't turn it over. It destroys the ecosystem and ruins the microclimate, and all the bugs and that. Their systems are ruined, etc., etc. And of course it disturbs the weeds, brings the seeds to the surface and they grow, and so on and so forth. And I've accepted that way of thinking, and as I've said before, really from now on I am going to be no dig as much as possible. And in the same magazine, 5 or 6 pages later, you'll have somebody else, the editorial or whatever, saying autumn is the time to dig over your plot. It aids, every time you turn the soil, it aids drainage and allows the frost to get in and break up the clods and does all that work for you. So, you know, get the spade out and get digging. You know, I wish these magazines would decide on a policy and stick with it. You know, we've had all that with food, haven't we? Eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, and all this, you know. But the gardening stuff, it's odd. I mean, I've in this, there's a thing about saying 5 myths debunked, and another one is the runner bean roots. When you take away your runner beans, cut them off at the root of the ground and leave the roots in, because they attract nitrogen and they hold nitrogen and they release it back into the soil. And then again, and that's appeared in this magazine. Further on, there's this article debunking myths, gardening myths, and it says that that is a myth, that these little white nodules of nitrogen, they're just retained in the plant, they're not given up, and so it's, you know, it's not beneficial to leave them in. It's a myth, and that goes right the way through all sorts of other things. I very often end up reading a magazine, and at the end of it, I'm just more confused than I was at the beginning. I mean, it's not just gardening, is it? Life is like that you get so much different advice, and you've just got to pick what it is that you think you're going to go with, which side you're going to drop on. But gardening, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's not rocket science, is it? It should be fairly simple. And yet, every time I pick up a gardening magazine, within the pages, there's something that contradicts. The editors should go through their magazines so that there's and edit out the bits that contradict each other, so that there's a consistent theme and a a consistent message that you and I can believe and adopt. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Does anybody else find that? Or is it just me? Well, that's it for another week. Thank you for watching, and well done if you made it to the end. And thank you to those who've subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so, and hit the like button. And whether you do or whether you don't, we'll see you, or I'll see you soon. Next weekend we depart for Scotland. I've got a canoe trip planned with some of my family, and I'm really looking forward to that. So I'm not sure I'll get a video out next weekend. If I don't, it will be the following weekend, so it might be a 2-week break, and I'll put some clips of our canoeing, and I hope you enjoy it. So thank you very much. See you again soon. Bye for now.